Good evening. Oh, are we on?
Yes. Yep.
Good evening and welcome to the Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting for Monday, November 19th. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff or commissioners?
Move for approval.
Yes, Commissioner Norton?
Move to approve.
Oh, move to approve, sorry. Need a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Second item is opportunity for someone in the audience to approach the commission on an item that is not on the agenda. Anybody wish to approach the commission? Seeing none, move on to approval of the minutes from October 1st, 2012. Any changes from staff or commissioners?
Nothing from staff, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other discussion? Any motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, and then a second?
I second.
All in favor of approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2012, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is review plans for replacing the playground equipment, Skyline Playground in Cliff Fen Park. And Mr. Terry Schultz is going to start us out. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The next item before you is to consider plans for replacing the playground equipment in Cliff Fen Park. Normally, we wouldn't bring playground replacement plans to this commission. We would let you know that we were replacing equipment. Usually, it's much smaller equipment, though. In this case, we have a budget of $280,000 to replace this equipment. It is what we consider a destination playground, so it isn't necessarily in a residential neighborhood where people can walk to it. Rather, it's significant enough that people drive to it to use the facilities. So I just wanted to point out that's why we're bringing a playground replacement to this group this evening, because it is a significant playground and one of a kind truly in our community. With those background comments, and I will turn it over to Garrett Beck, our recreation supervisor, who is the project manager for this replacement.
Okay, very good.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As Terry mentioned, I'm going to take you through a quick PowerPoint that kind of brings you up to speed on where our committee is with the replacement project down at Cliff Fen Park and the Skyland Playground. As I'm sure you guys know, the Cliff Fen Park is a 38-acre park that's adjacent to the Minnesota Valley Wildlife Refuge. There's a number of recreational amenities down at that park already, and one of the most popular ones in our park system was Skyline Playground that was down there, in addition to the other amenities that you see on the PowerPoint slide there. The 3 picnic shelters that are down there are heavily rented throughout the summer, and as you can imagine, a lot of times those are for family events and birthday parties related to young people wanting to use the playground in that area. We also have the athletic fields that are down there that are heavily used by our youth athletic associations. A little history on the playground itself. Back in 1990, a organization by the name of Skyline Displays, which was located near Cliff Fen Park, they came to us and made an offer to supply the city with the resources to purchase the materials necessary to build Skyland Playground, and then much of the volunteer hours that were necessary to help try to assemble it as part of that program. The end result of that project back in 1990 was the 150 by 150 wooden playground structure that became known as Skyland Playground. At the time, given the materials that was made out of and whatnot, the playground had a 20-year life expectancy. And as we got closer and closer to 2010, we started to see the playground itself have pieces that needed to be attended to, replaced, removed, modified, etc. It got to the point now in 2012 that because of safety reasons and whatnot, we finally did have to remove the playground completely, which will also help us with the installation process. So if you go down there right now, you will see an open space down there. Some of the things that our maintenance staff had to deal with are pictured here in this next slide. As you can see in the large slide there, we have bolts that are starting to be exposed and wearing away from the pole itself. The smaller slide on the top is just one example of some of the wooden posts that were holding the structure together. And again, please note that these are just above ground views of the posts themselves. We know from the removal process of pieces that things like this were taking place underground as well. And finally, in the bottom slide there, you can see pieces of equipment that back in 1990 it was okay to have that as part of a playground structure, but due to the changes in safety laws and whatnot, those things are no longer allowed. So we had a regular removal process going on down there. Because of this, we did put together a committee to deal with the replacement project and established a number of objectives in that committee. These objectives included providing an equal or better play experience than the one that was already down there. As Terry mentioned earlier, this is a park that's a destination park. We know through personal experience and observation that there are people from all over our community and other communities that travel to this park specifically for the opportunity to recreate at that playground location. Another goal included meeting or exceeding ADA accessibility guidelines. Again, with the existing park that was down there, there were not a lot of features that met those requirements. And so our goal was to make sure that the new park had plenty of opportunities for persons with disabilities. We wanted to stick with a theme that was consistent to that area. And so we ultimately chose a nature theme, which we thought went well with the nearby Minnesota Valley Wildlife Refuge. And we also wanted to create a multi-generational recreational opportunity. Recreation trends have shown us that in addition to parents coming to parks and wanting to play with their kids at the parks, we also have older siblings, we have grandparents, all kinds of people that will choose to go to a park, and while their children are playing, they're often interested in exercising and whatnot, whether it's articles and news reports of people putting together workout routines on playground equipment, or actually in some locations that we've seen across the country, they actually have playground or exercise equipment for adults. And so that was one of our goals, to be able to provide opportunities for all ages of people to be able to enjoy the park. And then the final piece was to allow for future expansion should we end up with sponsorships and whatnot, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. As I mentioned, we're very aware of the popularity of this park. The first thing that we did actually back in 2008 was contact the Leather and Associates company to explore the possibility of replacing what was built there in 1990 with a new project sometime in 2010, 11, 12, whatever it may be. As we had those discussions and whatnot with Leathers and Associates, we quickly saw that there were barriers in place that would prevent us from being able to do that exact project. As you can see on the slide here, the project back in 1990 cost a little over $200,000 for the materials. Today, those materials would put us somewhere most likely near $500,000, and that would just be for the materials themselves. So between the cost and the budget that we had to work with, the lack of having a key community group to lead the project, again, Skyline Displays, which was a major player in this back in 1990, has moved on to Egan. We did contact them, and unfortunately they were not able to participate this go-around. So the lack of a community group leader, and then just the staff demands of putting in a project of this magnitude in spring, we quickly saw that we would have to look at other options at this point. So based on our objectives that we established and knowing the direction we needed to go, we put together an RFP, and that was advertised for this project. The committee collected the RFPs. We also reached out to the children in our community at our playground sites and asked them to rate different types of playground equipment and to let us know what they found to be most interesting. And we used those to then put together our proposal ratings, which included play value, the layout and design, safety risk management, overall impression of the park, and then the maintenance and warranty related with taking care of the park over the next 20 to 25 years. When it was all said and done, out of the 5 proposals that we received, the St. Croix Recreation and Burke Playground equipment received the highest score from our committee. And we felt that that proposal itself not only created the best play value, but it also was the best proposal to provide a wider range of play experiences for a diverse group of people, which is what we were trying to reach also. So this next slide that you're looking at is a look at the playground from the Cliff End parking lot as we were proposing that it'll be in 2013. One of the things that you can't see in this particular slide is the seating area. It's in general going to be located in the very large green, dark green square that you see there as you're walking up to the playground. Our committee did talk about trying to preserve some of the history of the old playground, and we did try to save some of the towers. We want to have a seating layout as you enter the park for parents, grandparents, siblings to hang out in and to be able to watch kids and whatnot while they're there. So that you can't see that very well in this picture, but that is going to be part of the layout process as well. And then in the top part of the screen, one of the things you can't see is an area for the exercise equipment that I referenced earlier, and there'll be a slide a little later that shows some of that. So the main feature itself in the 5 to 12 age group includes 4 towers. 2 of the towers are over 9 feet tall. There's numerous climbing elements, bridges, slides that will allow for the flow of this system. And with the layout of the park, we are also aware of the idea of keeping young people ages 2 to 5 in one section of the park and the older age groups in the middle or on the other side of the park. And we're just excited about the layout and how the kids can flow from equipment to equipment and get around the park in the manner that we've observed with a lot of tag and different opportunities down there. Here's a view of the park itself from the back side of the park. So if you're standing in the north looking south, and again, off to your right, you can see the area for 2 to 5. And in that space, you've got tot swings and accessible seats, a variety of different play equipment. You can see all the 4 towers are laid out with slides all around it. And again, we've worked with St. Croix Rec and Burke on creating opportunities for kids to go through the entire 4 towers without having to touch the ground and to get from piece to piece and whatnot, which is kind of exciting. The large boulder off to the left, we've found to just be a very unique and just a piece of equipment that will have a lot of use down at the park. And then the swings and the tire swing for older kids off to the left side there. Real quickly, I kind of hit on some of those things. A couple of the things I didn't mention are the spinners, which have become more popular in the last several years for older age groups and even some of the younger kids, depending on how they're laid out. You can see the number of swings, the number of slides, things like that. As I mentioned earlier, there is going to be the 5 pieces of fitness equipment that'll be going into the park. And we've also allowed for a water mister that would, again, on hot days, you'll see in an upcoming slide where people can go over and it will kind of mist out. You push a button, it'll spray out water and let them cool off a little bit. Here's that slide that I was referencing. You can kind of get a feel for how the adult fitness equipment is created and set up for outdoor use, and just kind of a feel for what that mister will look like for kids and adults who might want to run through the water on a hot day. Real quickly on the budget, the Parks Capital Improvement Plan had $250,000 in it for us to work with on this particular project. We've also touched base with some of our local service groups, and we are seeking to get an additional $30,000 for them. One of the things that we understand that might come with a cooperation with one of these service groups is the opportunity to rename the playground, much like what happened back in 1990 when Skyline Displays wanted the playground to be named Skyland. We're assuming that whoever ends up partnering with us down the road, that they too will probably want to have some type of naming rights to the playground itself. So the total budget, as proposed by St. Croix Rec and Burke, comes in at about $280,000. And again, this will cover the purchase of the equipment, the installation, and the consulting services that we've had up to this point. You can see a quick look at how that plays out in this next slide. And we are now at the point where our goal is to, we've cleared the area. Again, Skyland is no longer down there. This space is currently been prepared by our park staff and is ready for installation of new equipment. Our timeline is next spring when the ground thaws, that if all goes well, we'll be ready to get down there and start the installation process. That process will probably take roughly 2 weeks to complete. Which, again, depending on the spring we have, will allow people in our community to get out and to begin to use the park. Early June is the timeline for I Love Burnsville Week, and what we would like to do is have a grand opening of that park during that week and have a special event for that. So at this time, Commissioners, the staff is asking that you consider a motion for the City Council recommending approval of the proposal from St. Croix Rec Burke for the replacement of the playground equipment in Cliff End Park. I will now stand for any questions or comments you may have about the project.
Thank you, Garrett.
You bet.
Any questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner West.
Mr. Chair, who was on the committee that did the selection?
Our committee was included Terry Schultz, myself, one of our consultants that we hired to help us out with the project, and then 2 of our park staff, Bruce White and help me out, Tom Schmidt. Sorry, yes. So again, we reached out to the young people in our community with boards and playground equipment and used that information to help determine the types of equipment and whatnot too.
So no one from the community was involved in making the decision?
That is correct.
Commissioner Nachman, you may recall we offered if any of the P&RC members would sit in on that process, and Commissioner Domke was interested, but in the end he wasn't able to have it fit into his schedule. So.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Wolf.
I'm wondering about the adult exercise equipment, if that's been installed elsewhere, and to what confidence you have that that'll be extensively used.
Sure. Our research and personal experience of my own has seen that this is a thing that's taking place in different parks around the country. As I mentioned, I saw a video the other day of a mom who has put together workout routines for other moms at parks and whatnot. So between seeing it happen in other places around the country and hearing from different groups that there's an interest in it, to create a multi-generational park seemed like a good direction for us to go.
Where would I be able to see equipment like that now? What would be the closest location?
Island Park Reserve in Bloomington. Are you familiar
Okay.
with that?
Oh, yeah. They have the adult exercise
It's a
equipment.
little bit off to the side. They have a rather large playground structure there also. It's not
Very nice, yeah.
immediately in that area, but we think there's a benefit to combining the two areas together.
Okay. Can I ask a question as well about the Mister? I think that'll be very popular, especially on hot days. What will be the ground underneath that, around that? Will that be over a cement slab, over sand? What will be the?
Yes. Right now, if you're familiar with the park, there is a water station down there with a water fountain and a foot washing station and whatnot. So it's going to be located in that area, and there would be a cement slab for drainage and whatnot in that area.
And this is a piece of equipment that's been used elsewhere successfully.
Yeah. The one that I'm most familiar with is at the Minnesota Zoo. You'll see something like that along one of the outdoor trails that they have. There's a couple different stations out there.
Thank you.
A question.
Yes, Mr. Wolf.
So you have said in one of the slides that you have a group that you reach out to in order for to get inputs.
Yes.
What kind of group, or what was the age limit?
Sure. The young people that participated in our Kids of Summer program, we've got roughly 300 kids that participate in our summer playground program that use the playgrounds in our parks, and they received boards with pictures of different playground equipment, and we had a process for bringing them through the boards and letting them identify the things that they found to be the most interesting that they would like to see at a new park.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Nachman?
I have two questions. How much is the adult equipment cost? What part of that would that be?
Mr. Hoekness is in the audience for those who might be watching, and he's the representative from St. Croix Burke Equipment.
That was $9,700, and then I believe it was discounted 8 to 10%.
Could
It was $9,700 for that equipment and discounted about 8 to 10%.
I guess I think that's a lot of money. Questioning, because we had to cut down on the equipment for the younger people. I would think that I like to see maybe some more of that money put on for equipment for the younger people and less for the adults, because a lot of the adults have lots of places to go exercise, but the kids don't. So my other question is the naming rights. Are we talking about a major contribution from someone? You said that we have, was it $30,000 from the community groups? Are they entitled to have the naming rights, or maybe this is something the community could do as a project to name that?
Commissioner Nachman, we see that as being one community group that would donate that amount of money, and in exchange for that amount, staff's recommendation would be that we would give that group the naming rights for the facility.
How much money are we talking about?
$20,000 to $30,000.
That's in addition to the $30,000 that was already given?
That is the $30,000 that's identified in that worksheet.
I'm uncomfortable with that in terms of the amount of money that putting into it. I think the naming of something is maybe something that the city or maybe some young people could think of to do rather than name it. We already had Skyline Park. We don't need to do X company park or something like that. I'm just uncomfortable with that. I think time to put in the community.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I would say to you that the naming part of it is critical to receiving that donation from our conversations
Okay.
with the community service groups.
Well, with all due respect, that wasn't explained. So I'm still uncomfortable, but
Yeah, obviously, commissioners, you could decide that that's not worth, $30,000, and we want to retain the right to name it. But I would say to you, if you want to get that substantial of a donation, you're going to have to tie that to some naming rights. Now, we're not talking about renaming the park, just the playground within the park.
That includes some sort of, I suppose, some sort of sign there now.
Yeah. And that's similar to what we had with Skyline, and there was information there about Skyline displays and the donation that they had made.
was that a condition of giving the money?
Nothing's been finalized yet, but in the discussions we've had, that's been a very important element for the community service groups.
So the answer is yes. Okay.
One question. So if we give the naming convention a name to the group, are they going to help maintain, volunteer, or anything else for the park?
The groups we've been talking with have had an interest in a long-term relationship with the playground, kind of this initial investment and then perhaps additional investments down the road. It would be our hopes, if I can just add on to that, I mean, again, this is a much smaller budget than we had hoped for. I don't know if Garrett mentioned, but we went in, 3 years ago with a $350,000 budget. It got reduced by $100,000, and we were challenged to try and raise money. And so that's why we're kind of pursuing community service groups and naming rights to kind of supplement the budget. But again, most of these groups, I think, are interested in a longer-term commitment.
Mr. Chair, there's a gentleman from the audience that
Yeah, Paul,
was shaking his head.
For recreation, I did make a mistake. I looked at the wrong line item. The MISTR is actually about $2,400. I was looking at the exercise equipment. That's the $9,700. So the spray MISTR is $2,400.
Okay.
It's the same company that builds all of your water features, drinking fountains, and that, the most dependable fountains.
Okay.
I would
Thank you.
apologize for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr.
I have a few
Denzig?
questions. First of all, Terry, do we have any idea what the attendance has been historically over there in exact numbers or some type of exact numbers of how much this park has in fact been used? And to justify even the investment?
We wouldn't have exact numbers or even rough numbers to offer. I mean, one thing we do know in our department is most of our shelter rentals down there are related to family events and birthday parties and whatnot. And we also know that there are daycare organizations that are near that park that often are going over there and using that facility as part of their daily routines and whatnot. So we know that it is through visually going by it that it's heavily used, and our rentals that we're aware of also indicate that it is heavily
But the rentals are separate.
Yes.
But just so I understand, we have no idea really, other than hearsay, of how much this park truly is being utilized.
Commissioner Dedze, we have two pieces of information. We did some spot checks with our Park Service officers. I believe it was 2011, and we were seeing probably average on a nice day. Obviously, if it's raining, nobody's there, but averages in the 40 to 50 children down there when we were down taking our counts. We also know from our park maintenance staff when they're down there that number seems to be about right. Now, we haven't we don't have cameras there, so I can't tell you how long their stay is on average. But anecdotally, and when we have taken counts down there, it's been in that neighborhood of 40 to 50 children and adults.
I just want to express, I do feel somewhat uncomfortable knowing that we're taking this type of investment, not really knowing some of the numbers. I think that it's something we should be looking at as we're investing these types of dollars into players. Years ago, we extensively knew almost to the person how many people were skating, but today we don't know how many people are visiting this park. It seems a little difficult for me to accept paying this type of money without knowing that. I have a couple more questions. Is there any bike racks, since this is a destination park, is there any bike racks included in this?
We don't have any bike racks in the current proposal as is, no.
And then my last question is that there was some discussion or some comment that was made that Walmart was going to make some contribution into this park. Is there anything discussed about that, or are they being considered as one of the individuals coming up with a $30,000? Or I just wonder if they're involved in this at all.
Commissioner Dedze, Walmart has made some contributions to the community, not to this specific park, and we have not been discussing this project with them. We started these discussions before Walmart was really into our community. And so, again, they've been a good addition to the community, and I think they will be making I know they have made contributions, and I'm hopeful that they can in the future for some of our other park projects.
That's end of my questions.
Yes, Mr. Wolf?
Yes, if I can follow up a couple of things. I guess I don't want to be confrontational by any means, Len, but I would just note that I think for $30,000, I'm comfortable allowing for some naming. Obviously, it depends on the name to some extent, but I'm sure that everybody recognizes that and that the name will be appropriate. And so we're talking about 10% of the total funding being put up by private organization. I wouldn't have trouble with the naming issue. John, I think your point is very good about the bike racks, and I'm wondering about the connection if we put the trail in down along the river, if we can connect that in some way to this park as well, because the park, I used the park a lot when my children were young, but it was a drive-to park for the most part. It's not a very easy park to get to on bike, even for adults. And if you're taking children, the roads are pretty busy there. It's a little hairy. It'd be wonderful if we could tie in with those bike paths and put in some bike racks. I think that would enhance the value greatly, because a lot of families with young kids will make a half a day out of it. Ride to the park, play at the park, run through the mister, and ride back home. So I think thinking about the bikes is would be important.
Mr. Chair, getting back to the naming, are there any criteria that are going to be used, since we have criteria for putting monuments up and naming parks and things like that? Are there some criteria that we don't have some funky name, which is possible, since we're accepting the money, which is, I agree, is a lot of money. But I think that also the name, if I knew that there were some criteria that we could have for naming the park, I would feel more comfortable and grateful to the people that give us the 30,000 or 20, whatever they're giving.
Commissioner Nachman, commissioners, we would follow our facility naming procedure, which we do have, and that policy does allow for naming of a facility after an organization that contributes a significant amount of money to a park or a project. So it is in alignment with our policy. I would suggest that we would like to have some feedback from you this evening, and perhaps if you would consider putting it in your motion, approving the concept of naming the playground after a organization, that would be helpful. And then the next step is we would work with that organization to come up with a name, and it would come back to this commission for a recommendation, and ultimately it would have to be approved by the city council.
Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Yes, Commissioner.
Garrett, you don't show any pictures of expansion space. Where would that footprint be, or is it within the existing footprint?
Yeah. I'm just going to pull up the first slide, as you're looking from the parking lot, we've allotted for expansion space to the left of this slide here. Some of the discussion that we've had and some of the ideas and plans have included the possibility of putting a splash pad in that space, which is near where our water source is. Again, recreation trends and some of our neighboring communities have installed splash pads that are incredibly popular with young people and families and whatnot. And as we're going through negotiations with some possible sponsorship groups, these are the ideas that we're talking about, is not only just helping us get to this point for this particular stage of the playground process, but helping us get to that next level as well.
I'd like to see, in future presentations along the way, just to show that extra footprint so it's in people's minds that this isn't a terminal event, that expansion could occur, and as popularity grows, that we've thought about that and we're considering we have that capacity for expansion, and as if more dollars become available, that plan could move forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one more question for me,
Yes,
please.
Commissioner.
The life expectancy of the old equipment was approximately 20 years. With standard maintenance on this equipment, is there a prediction as to life expectancy on this equipment?
There's lifetime warranties on all of the posts and the platforms and all that, but 40 to 50 years, you get into these new products, they're all very quality built, and this one was
It can-
wood. And so it's everything we've got now is steel, vinyl coated, and
Okay,
polypropylene plastic.
okay.
So just for clarification, this particular project has a life expectancy of 40 to 50 years, lifetime warranty on the equipment.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Ackley?
Derek, what are the accommodations for people with disabilities when I look at that material, the brown stuff? It must be, since we have slides, we have to accommodate where the kids are going to dump in the slides. So how would someone in a wheelchair get from one side of that to the other? Second, what are the accommodations for people with some type of mobility issues to use one of the slides?
The dark green space in there is set up to be a material that's poured in place, which is essentially a rubberized material that will make accessibility very easy. The brown areas of the playground structure are all approved for accessibility purposes and whatnot. It'll be a wood fiber material.
Sorry, could you speak up?
Yeah, the brown area is a wood fiber material that is ADA approved and is acceptable for using in a playground structure to allow for that. There's also requirements for the number of play features for persons with disabilities at ground level and for their use. And also we do have some slides that would allow them to transition to a particular play feature and use it based on what their abilities are.
Okay.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Just last one.
Yes,
So the area that we had previously and the area that we are going to use for equipment today, what is the difference?
It's very similar to the footprint that was there now to the way we have the layout right now. The shape is a little different, but the overall square
area.
footage is going to be relatively close, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Terry? Oh, yes.
I don't have a question, but I don't, in my mind, I don't feel that we resolved the adult exercise equipment aspect of this. I have some reservations. It sounds like it's less than 5% of the total cost, which I could accept that without a problem, but I'd love to have some conversation about it. It's not something I would ever have used taking my children there because, for one thing, you're watching your children.
Right.
And so I don't know that what you said, Len, is the adults have lots of places to go. Biking, exercise facilities that are designed just for that. And I don't know that I want to attract adults there just to use the exercise equipment. This is a playground for kids as far as I'm concerned. So if the adults can use the exercise equipment while the kids are playing, if both parents are there and one adult's using the exercise equipment, maybe that works. That's part of why I asked how this stuff gets used. If in fact, I thought about maybe going over and seeing how it gets used. But I guess I'm interested in more discussion about whether or not we want to invest $9,000 in adult exercise equipment or put that into the playground
Thank
for children.
What question? So do we also have a plan B or C or D, whatever you call it, that if we, as Commissioner Wolf was talking about, if we add $10,000 more, how can we expand this, what it's sitting today?
We currently do not have another plan that would involve putting another $10,000 into this project. Based on our current budget, we've spent all the money. So if we had to reallocate funds, we'd have to go back to the drawing board and determine what we could get for the funds that we've freed up.
I would personally like to at least see one or two, for me, from my perspective, so we can weigh and say, okay, instead of putting 10,000 here, there, what is the benefit, and then talk about it.
That begs a couple of questions. One is when is the final decision have to go to the board, and we don't want to keep debating it here. That would probably have to be a work session. So I guess I'd want to know the answer to the first question first before we even go down that road.
Well, Mr. Holkness maybe can give us an indication once we order it, how this equipment needs to be manufactured, and what's the typical manufacturing timeline on the equipment once we place the order?
Once we've decided, chairpersons, once we've decided that this is the equipment that you'd want, it's typically 4 to 6 weeks, and it's manufactured in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, so we get about a turnaround about 4 to 6 weeks. And this is a unique project. It's very nice because we're doing it over the winter. They couldn't keep up 2 months ago, but right now it's a nice project if we could order it in the middle of the winter and have everything ready to go when the ground freezes.
I have a
So the
follow-up.
second question would be when would the council have to have our decision? Our recommendation, I should say.
Commissioners, I would recommend, we have this before council in the month of January, no later than that. So we could certainly revisit some of the items. I would encourage you to stay at a big picture level. So as Commissioner Nachman said, if you don't believe, exercise equipment is a component we should have in here, then we could revisit that. But for us to sit down and go through, there are 60-some play components in this, Mr. Holkness.
At least 60.
At
At least
maybe
60.
I'm underestimating.
There's at least 60 components in there. Yeah.
And so certainly if you wanted to revisit a major element like that, it's something that we would have time to do. We'd want to have something back before council by January of 2013.
So we're looking for sure next month in December. We'd have to have something early December if we were going to do that. Yes.
I have another question, but I'm not going to address that. But I'm just going to say I think that's a point well taken on the exercise equipment that needs to be addressed. But I do have one more detailed question. You may have just answered that, though. That is, what's the maximum capacity of number of kids that could be playing at this at any one time?
Can I grab my book real
Yes.
quick? Okay.
While Mr. Holkness is gathering that, from our perspective, the exercise play equipment was just that. It's intended for parents, the extended family that may go down with the children, to give them an opportunity to exercise while the children are playing on the equipment. And we're seeing a lot of extended families now using our facilities. That means grandparents, mom and dad, and it may be older teens that would be using those areas that probably aren't there to play on the equipment, but might use the exercise equipment.
The answer to that is 217. That's total user capacity, 217 people
217 unique.
Yeah.
At one time.
at one time.
And how does that, Garrett, can you answer, how does that compare to our previous place? Do you have any idea?
Can I just
Okay.
answer that? Many of you don't know me, but I was the park superintendent here in Burnsville from 1988 to 1995, and that Leathers project was my project. When we built it, it's just a very unique situation, very, very nice. You know, it was just the trendiest thing to do. But if you actually go there, there's not a lot to play on. There's not a lot of slides. There's, you know, a few swings, and it really was more of a lot of activities for kids to run around and gather and hide in a couple tunnels. So this is totally kind of a different experience. So if you saw 50 kids down at the Leathers, they'd be fighting for a swing. I mean, that's the way this is. But if you had 200 kids down here, they'd all have something to play on. So
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hogan, can you hold on 1 minute, please? Can I,
Yes, Commissioner Wolf?
as long as you're up, I see that climbing rock.
yeah, the boulder.
My kids would absolutely love that, would have loved that. They loved the park as it was. So you did a great job the first time around.
Thank you.
But I know they would have really liked that. That's the kind of thing that I see as a trade-off between the adult exercise equipment, you know, and that kind of a structure. And I'm wondering, from your experience selling this equipment and so forth, if I were to, you know, and I'm just throwing this out, not saying that we should do this. I like the overall plan. I'll go on record for that. But if we were to throw out the adult exercise equipment and look for something like this climbing boulder,
Mhm.
you have anything else like that that's
Yes, we do.
popular that would
Yes, we
fit
do.
in that budget?
Yeah, we do. We've got a wide variety of climbing features and spinning features, but climbing especially, they came up with a new, and I think if you showed the reverse angle of this thing, we've got one on the back side. If you look, kind of, I can't really point to that in this, but if you look at where the little kid in the blue is running off to his one side,
Mhm.
Can you zap? Right where he's
Yep, there's a
circling there.
climbing, yep.
We've got climbing features like that that are even freestanding, and we also have net climbers and different things like that that we can provide too. So
It would be, I don't think that this has to be entirely reworked.
Yep.
I would love to see just some options.
Yep.
If what we would be trading off.
Yep.
If we decided that we wanted to go with more playground equipment and set aside the adult exercise equipment for the time being. It would help me make the decision if I knew, you know, what I could get for that $9,600 or whatever it was.
well, we'd be glad to put some options together. Anything.
That would be
You're the
that would be
owners.
appreciated on my part.
Same here.
I'd get some direction from the architect and some of the other staff members, and I think they've got kind of an idea of what you're thinking about there. So
Is the climbing rock a real rock?
no. If it was, we wouldn't be able to get it here and set it up.
We're going to do that.
Yeah, no, they're very, very secured plastic material that's very, very sturdy and almost bulletproof.
These are like the climbing features where you attach the little hand grips and
yep,
stuff.
hand
Yep,
and
so you can
footholds
rearrange
going all
them.
the way up, and they can sit on the top of it, and it's a nice feature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it seems that we're not totally decided then tonight, is what I gathered. Terry, I don't know if we want to schedule a work session, just kind of talk this out, or
A couple of approaches, I guess. What I'm hearing commissioners say, and we should test that. By the way, I'm not sure where all the commissioners are. At least there seems to be 3 of you that are looking to change out the exercise equipment area for additional other playground equipment. And Mr. Chairman, maybe we could just make sure that that's where all of the other commissioners are at. We could certainly take a look at that and bring it back to you. We do have a quick turnaround. We have a meeting on December 3rd. Mr. Holkness, how quickly can we pull? Not that quick. December 3rd. That's in 2 weeks, I believe. We could,
I probably won't be able to have Thanksgiving with my family, but that's not a problem.
Mr. Hocus is saying he'll have to forgo
There you
Thanksgiving.
go, Commissioner Wolf.
And I think we
I'm
were
okay with
that.
It's on my belt.
Yeah. We could do that at a work session, Commissioners, or we could bring it to a formal agenda so you could act on it at the December meeting also.
Yes, Commissioner Mockman.
I'd just like to see an alternative to the exercise equipment. As far as the rest of it, I think it's fine, but that's the only concern, so I don't think we can have to make too big an issue of it, but I sure would like to see a Plan B just for that, and what could be, for the dollars, what could we have?
Not a problem.
So the formal action you might want to consider, Commissioners, is a motion to table this item and to come back with another plan that would replace the exercise equipment area with some additional playground equipment.
All right, then I guess we need a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to table this until our next meeting. We can look at the other options.
Okay, now, so we're making a motion to look at other options which might include removing the adult educate or adult exercise equipment. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. One nay. Motion carries to be tabled. Okay, next item is miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous items from commissioners or staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Just a quick note, we did have a couple of tornadoes touch down in our community. It's impact our department's workload a little bit, our forestry department anyhow, on the evening of November 10th, and it was an EFO, which means the wind speeds of 65 to 85 miles per hour. And it was kind of a narrow band that was impacted in our community, but it was kind of right through the center of the community. So we do have our compost site open for residents to bring their storm debris. Kind of wanted to put that on this cable production, and it's open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week through December 9th. For those folks in town that maybe had some trees blown down and want to bring that tree debris only to the compost center, which is located just behind the Dodge of Burnsville.
Okay.
Excuse me, what were the hours for that?
It is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. And the only other note I would make is we'll have our next meeting for Monday, December 3, 6:30 p.m.
So maybe we didn't discuss it, but about with having a work session or bringing it back to the, would it be too much time on camera to discuss it if we brought it so we could vote on it right away?
My preference, if you're comfortable with it, would be to do it under the regular agenda so you can make a decision.
I think that would be best.
If you're comfortable with that, that's what staff would recommend. But the other option is if you wanted to meet early before the meeting and go through stuff, we could spend some time off camera to go over it, and then
6 o'clock.
meet at 6 if everybody can make it. And
Yeah, we could do that.
I like that.
Would it be possible just to send us a sketch of what Plan B looks like?
Or
we will do our best.
just what,
Give me a week. Is that about a week away? A week?
It should be 2 weeks. 2 weeks away.
Start working on it tomorrow.
just some alternatives.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, we need a motion.
Is it 6 o'clock? Are we going to vote? Are we going to meet at 6?
Yeah, Commissioners, I don't think you need to vote on it. I see a lot of head shaking. We'll start with a work session at 6 and then convene the regular meeting at 6:30 and put this item on the regular agenda.
Okay. Okay, that's all on our agenda. Need a motion to adjourn? I'll make that motion to adjourn. Need a second?
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you and good night.